It was supposed to be X's comeback, boasting production from luminaries such as Kanye West and Dr. Dre, and overseen by Swizz Beatz. But DMX's album was slow to come by, mainly because of X himself. He was no longer the imposing and prolific superstar. Legal and domestic issues continued to bog him down. A bankruptcy filing in 2013, a divorce in 2014, 6 months in jail for failure to pay child support in 2015, a health scare in a parking lot in 2016, drug rehab in 2017 and 2019, imprisonment for tax fraud from 2018 to 2019. The string of misfortune never seemed to end, and it was serious enough to keep X's output at just 2 songs in 7 years. But then there seemed to be hope. In 2019, after over a decade, DMX returned to Def Jam, the home that made him a superstar and the place he helped cement as the greatest record label in rap music history. The next year, at the dawn of the COVID-19 pandemic, Swizz Beatz became co-creator of Versus, a web series that pitted hip-hop and R&B acts against each other in a hit-for-hit battle. DMX had his battle with Snoop Dogg on July 22, 2020, emerging the winner according to Billboard. Snoop was a good sport though, and besides, the whole point about Versus is mutual respect for each other's discographies, not a score-settling diss-fest. Snoop offered X his home studio to record most of his upcoming album's material. Swizz Beatz had been by DMX's side for the entirety of the latter's career, from the moment he produced his smash single Rough Riders Anthem through the peak of his commercial success in the late 90s and even the leaner years in the 2000s onward, pitching in a couple of tracks when needed. But this time, DMX's 8th album, it felt different. The X-Man was nearing 50, his output slowed by his unabated misfortune, his self-confidence battered by his missing teeth and ballooned weight, his chemistry off with his most celebrated production partner because they hadn't worked together in a studio in close to 15 years. Swizz had his job cut out for him. According to Swizz, he paused all his projects to wrap up what would become known as Exodus, alluding to the chapter and verse in the Bible's book of Exodus that mentions the ancient Hebrews flourishing despite being under slavery in Egypt. The title also alludes to the name of DMX's son, Exodus, who was born in 2016 to his then fiancée, Desiree Lindstrom, and ended up being around the studio where the album was recorded. So the X-Man seemed to have a new lease on life. The first issue, though, was to get him to record something. Anything. Having him away from New York and in Southern California instead was a start. Swizz preferred to catch him in the daytime, fully understanding DMX's propensity to slip into his inner demons during nightfall, or during the weekends, or when he was alone. A 2-month training regimen was also in the cards, designed to get him closer to his physical prime in the late 90s to the early 2000s. Unfortunately, that never happened.
DMX has died. The rapper's death follows his hospitalization after suffering a heart attack triggered by a drug overdose. DMX turned 50 in December.
I just want to continue to do what I do. Work hard with the music, don't compromise the music.
E.T. learned that medical staff at his home tried to revive him twice, and he was later revived again at a hospital in White Plains, New York. A source close to the rapper and actor told E.T. that DMX recently relapsed with his drug addiction and previously suffered from COVID-19. The source added that before he died, DMX's family was by his bedside, holding his hand and praying.
The demons that tortured DMX for most of his life permanently got the best of him on April 9th, 2021. And in the wake of his earthly exit, Swizz Beatz and Def Jam were faced with the inevitable perception of exploitation. Granted, there was some knowledge that X was working on an album, but that wasn't exactly in front of people's entertainment minds when he passed away. And he wasn't exactly prolific during his last years either. So, when the announcement concerning Exodus went out a month after his death, followed by the release of the album on May 28th, there had to be a sense of worry about its timing and stage of completion, even as Swizz himself asserted that the project was completed 2 months before DMX's death. Was X's official send-off going to be more of a bite, a bark, or a whimper? If we are to be brutally honest with ourselves, there weren't any high hopes for Exodus. This wasn't the mid-90s when we had Tupac and Biggie cut down in their prime and the rap genre was still relatively fresh. It was 2021 when hip-hop had reigned for 2 decades as the country's dominant pop culture and musical force, numb to success and premature demises, with a rap superstar well past his prime. Indeed, when Exodus came out, it peaked at number 8, a better position than number 19, the peak of his worst album, Undisputed. But Exodus's apex on the Billboard 200 chart was way below the peak of Year of the Dog again at number 2, not to mention the chart-topping first 5 albums. To paraphrase DMX's fellow Rough Rider, Jadakiss, dead rappers no longer got better promotion. But that doesn't mean that Exodus doesn't have some good things going for it. For starters, DMX sounds marginally better here than on his previous 2 albums. Granted, his vocal quality had been permanently ravished by his hard living and hard life, but he sounds rejuvenated and on the road to recovery. Secondly, it's nice to see a robust supporting cast joining forces to uplift their fallen comrade. As executive producer and longtime collaborator, Swizz Beatz co-produces 8 of the 13 tracks that end up on Exodus. A 9th song, Hold Me Down, has him going for dolo behind the boards, recruiting his wife Alicia Keys to sing the hook and distorting a sample of the Headhunters' God Made Me Funky for a simmering beat that optimizes DMX's heart-wrenching final appeal to God and his friends and family to have his back.
Treat me like a family, and I did some dumb I ain't never been a dummy, and I know God love me.
Former DMX album regulars, The Lox, return with the very first track, That's My Dog. All 4 Rough Riders glide over the eerie soundscape that Swizz provides with Arab music. Snoop Dogg, who, as earlier mentioned, lent his recording studio to X for the album, appears on Take Control to express explicit hood love with sampled vocals of Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing. And, of course, as mentioned, X's son and the album's namesake was present at some of the recording sessions, even getting a skit and a song dedication all to himself. The increased industry support, especially considering that Def Jam was back in the picture, and compared to the Year of the Dog, again, and Undisputed albums, yields some remarkable moments. In addition to the previously mentioned Hold Me Down, there's the ominous horn-dominated Bath Salts with contemporaries Jay-Z and Nas for a grand turn-of-the-century rhyme fest. For the street grime stuff, it gets no better than Hood Blues, a chillin', dusty boom-bap atmosphere helmed from Lee Mason and his orchestra's Shady Blues. This is one for upstate New York, as Yonkers' very own DMX is joined by Buffalo's West Side Gun, Benny the Butcher, and Conway the Machine, credited as the Griselda Collective, for bars upon bars of guns, grams, and grime. And X, emotive as always, steals the show with his closing So Barren verse.
Damn it, cause I'm a savage. Sometimes I can't manage holding shit in my hand. I was promised the world, but I got the dirt standards.
But there's probably nothing on Exodus more so barren than its penultimate cut. Letter to My Son is chillingly cautionary, a rambling, offbeat one-verse letter to X's son. Don't do drugs, here's why you have more than a dozen siblings, and so on and so forth, that keeps going with the somber violin and piano for Usher to grace with his vocals. It's a sobering summation of DMX's messy personal life, with the hope that the next generation does a lot better. These songs are, to pardon the pun, the pick of the litter. But the other songs are not too bad either. Walkin' in the Sun, which has DMX revisit a well-worn metaphor for trials and tribulations, is a neo-soul pool that features Nas with an invigorating verse, co-producer Denon Porter, formerly of D12, singing the chorus, and Exodus cutely singing to the song. Skyscrapers, a metaphor for aspirations, immediately follows and is the acoustic guitar-helmed companion of Hold Me Down. It's a go for your dreams song that features U2 frontman Bono. With a name like Dogs Out, not to be confused with the one on Grand Champ, Lil Wayne overdoes it with the dog puns, but considering his reputation for wacky metaphors, it's a pass. And it's interesting to wonder how a song like that would have sounded if it were recorded in 2000, around the time their respective camps, Rough Riders for X, Cash Money for Wheezy, crossed paths in a joint nationwide tour. Also with a what-if quality is Money Money Money, which sounds enthralling with its Middle Ages style harpsichords, but was originally intended for a guest spot from Pop Smoke. The Brooklyn drill rapper had recorded his verse in January 2020, but then a month later he was murdered. In addition, just a month before Exodus was supposed to be released, Swizz had to remove the verse altogether since Pop Smoke's record label, Republic Records, planned to use it for another track. So Swizz reached out to Moneybagg Yo as a replacement, and his verse is serviceable, but one can't help but wonder if a match to X's gruff aesthetic, rather than a literal match to the song's title, could have made Money 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 a much better song. Complete with two rappers who departed this life way too soon at a year apart from each other. The only track that deserves to be omitted altogether is the self-explanatory Stick Up skit. Much respect to Ignatius Icepick Jackson, an A&R and executive producer for Rough Riders Entertainment, who had passed away due to colon cancer in 2017. The skits included in Exodus are a form of tribute to him, since he participated in and is credited with some of the ones in DMX albums. But remember how they turn out? Two standalone skits, The Storm and Mickey, are not needed. Mickey, in particular, which is inspired by a scene from the 1993 film Menace to Society, is one of the several tracks in the 90s that began to run down the skit concept by ending with someone getting shot. Pac-Man, the lone standalone skit, the opening line doesn't really count as a skit, is yet another short track that ends with someone getting shot. And the shakedown is, yes, a third consecutive album skit where someone ends up getting shot. Come Prepared barely lasts for longer than 30 seconds, and it's a fourth skit in which, yes, someone gets shot at the end. Yeah, that doesn't change with this one. Exodus is easily a stronger offering than the two albums that immediately precede it, but that's not a high bar to clear, and there's an unfinished quality to it. At 13 tracks and 40 minutes, it's the shortest album in a discography that's dominated by long albums. A short album was never really DMX's style, and there's not one song with a traditional three-verse format from him. So, is a comparatively short album the result of A, a recording process that was truly completed, according to Swizz, B, the maximum amount of output that Swizz could get out of DMX, whose work rate had slowed considerably since his unprecedented 5 #1 album streak, or C, both recognizing the trend of album brevity in an attention-shortened era of social media and streaming. History and evidence points to B as the most plausible answer, with C being another factor. The last track, Prayer, is a recording of DMX's religious performance with Kanye West's Sunday Service Choir at Coachella on May 17, 2019. Customarily, each DMX album comes with a prayer track, usually positioned toward the end and chronologically numbered, starting from the second album. Undisputed committed taboo by not only omitting the Roman numeral suffix, but also sticking it in the middle of the album. That could be excused in light of DMX being at his absolute artistic and emotional low. But the missing Roman numeral here, as well as the prayer track's placement at the very end of Exodus, creates an aura of finality, the equivalent of not a comma, a semicolon, or an ellipsis, but rather a full stop. And that full stop is a metaphor for the professional fate of DMX compared to the trajectories of Jay-Z and Nas in Bath Salts. The suave Jay-Z raps with peace and ease, understandable for a guy who, through his numerous business ventures, was declared hip-hop's first ever billionaire in 2019. The same year when X returned to Def Jam. Nas, ever the wordsmith, raps like he's still hungry and trapped in Queensbridge, even though he's almost as prosperous as Jay with his business endeavors. From music and sports to tech and media, Jay-Z and Nas are not just two of the greatest MCs of all time, but also two of the most financially successful MCs of all time. By contrast, listening to DMX, with his aggression and gun talk carried in a deteriorated voice, and with full knowledge of his financial issues, has him stuck in the late 90s. So, one of the greatest MCs of all time? Yeah, but definitely not top tier. One of the most financially successful MCs of all time? Definitely not. And that's Exodus for you. A spirited bark, a record that sits comfortably in the middle of DMX's catalog, an unintended but admirable send-off. An album that makes you wonder how much better it could have been if his troubled and ravaged heart hadn't finally given out. And Exodus is microcosmic of DMX's initially explosive but ultimately unrewarded career. Bath Salts grabbed DMX's fourth and last Grammy nomination for Best Rap Song at the 64th Annual Grammy Awards. But it lost to Jail, a song that granted a 24th competitive Grammy to X's designated arch nemesis, Jay-Z. But if major award schemes missed the mark with X, it's hard to imagine any MC within the last 3 decades getting more street love than he did. And that was demonstrated when fans blasted Rough Riders' anthem as his body left White Plains Hospital, and later as his shiny red casket rode on a monster truck through New York City and Yonkers with a funeral procession of bikers and four-wheelers, before landing in his final resting place at his hometown's Oakland Cemetery. For all the sadness concerning his passing, maybe there's solace to be found in the thought that the dog, left to roam to find his permanent peace, finally made his way home. Thanks for watching. For those new here, welcome to Rap Perspective. For the Rappleheads, I greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment on, and share this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I encourage everyone to watch, like, comment on, and share other videos on here. See you in the next video.